You're watching Inside Utah Politics.
Time now to dig deeper into some of the big stories of the week with the Inside Utah Politics panel. This week we have Crystal Young-Otterstrom and Adam Gardner. Great to have both of you with us. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Happy to be here.
During the week I was able to catch up with Governor Herbert. He told me he's had conversations with Secretary Zinke about potentially moving the BLM headquarters here to the state of Utah. He said, quote, "There's a great possibility." Adam, let's start with you. Make the argument for moving BLM headquarters out of Washington, D.C. and here to the state of Utah.
Well, there's definitely an argument to be made. The government closest to the people governs best. And there was an example when I used to work for Congressman Rob Bishop that he would always use. If you have a problem with the school board or something your school is doing, you can call your neighbor who's on the school board, or you can go to a school board meeting and try and get the problem resolved. If you have a problem with the Department of Education, you have to fly to D.C., and once you get to their headquarters, nobody cares that you're there. They're not going to help you. And I think that there's an argument to be made for moving the BLM headquarters to the state of Utah, because those people that work here have to live here and have to regulate their neighbors. And so the rules and regulatory issues that are coming out of that organization might be drastically different.
Crystal, is there a reason to just leave it in D.C. where it is?
Well, I don't think the world's going to end either way, but my understanding is that the BLM is a little bit different than some of our other federal agencies, and so they do have local offices in the various regions in which they operate. And so we already have local BLM offices that are staffed by Utahns, with Utahns making these regulatory decisions already. So I'm not sure what difference it makes to move it here beyond costing the federal government millions of dollars to move it, which is not really fiscally responsible.
This might be up your alley as the Sully County Recorder, but I'd like to get your opinion on from both of you. When Representative Chaffetz was in D.C., he was starting to work on this effort to scatter government, because his argument was D.C. shouldn't be the only one benefiting from the tax base and the money that the federal government departments were bringing to that area. Could that be part of this conversation?
I think it's a huge part of the conversation. If you look at some of the wealthiest counties in the entire country, they're right around Washington, D.C. It's a big problem. And I think that the more regulations and the more staff that are centralized in D.C., the more lobbyists come to D.C., and the more you just build up that network and more staff. If we talk about spending money, this is a problem.
Crystal, your thoughts on that, spreading the wealth?
Well, considering how liberal D.C. and its surrounding areas are, it seems like that'd be a great boost for Democrats.
All right, well, let's move on.
Then I take back everything I said.
Yeah, okay. All right, you guys can finish this conversation out in the parking lot. Okay, let's move on to another topic, a pretty big one here for the state of Utah. The Washington Post reporting that the Trump administration ignored critical information on the benefits that national monuments can bring to tourism when making the decision to shrink 2 national monuments here in the state of Utah. Crystal, we'll start with you on this one.
Well, I'm LDS like Adam is, and I'm sure that we both believe how important it is for us to be good stewards of God's creation. And I think that it's very short-sighted for them to only consider these money benefits and not think about additional money benefits like the boost from tourism, but also how important it is to protect these lands so that our families can enjoy them. And so it just really shows that they were already biased in their decision. They already knew what they wanted to do, and it's kind of disgusting.
A lot of people, conservatives, said the same thing about President Obama when he declared Bears Ears a national monument, or President Clinton when he declared Grand Staircase Escalante. Is that what this is a political issue that the mind was already made up before they went in?
Well, it's definitely a political issue. I don't think there's been any more political issue in the state of Utah over the past year or two than the national monuments. We're making an argument, though, about a document dump that came from Secretary Zinke's office. So we can say that it was ignored. I don't think it was ignored. I think that was definitely taken into consideration. But whether they chose to include that in the report is completely another topic. I was grateful that President Trump gave the assignment to Secretary Zinke to go and visit a couple of dozen monuments and make the recommendations to him. I felt like Utah hadn't been listened to in this realm in a very long time. I was just watching the testimony of former Governor Mike Leavitt back in December at the House Resources Committee, where he said he got a telephone call from President Clinton at 1:48 in the morning as he was traveling to Arizona to designate the monument, months before he was told that that was not going to happen at all. And so I think the problem here is maybe both sides can agree, the Republicans and Democrats can agree, that the way that we designate monuments and shrink monuments is a problem. And I think we all have representatives in Washington, D.C. that are perfectly capable of making these decisions, but Congress has abdicated its authority and given that over to the president and to other agencies. That's a problem.
State officials insist they're going to take care of this land, if not better than the federal government. Do you have faith in that?
Well, if you ever spend time in a state park versus a federal park, you definitely see a difference in how well the roads are maintained and other things, and the federal ones are better. But what I would add is, you know, it certainly is complicated that Utah is 75% owned by the federal government. And the thing to remember with the monuments is none of that land wasn't already federal land in some degree. You know, no new land was given over to the federal government. And I think if we're so concerned that Utah only has 25% use of its land, why are we going after these beautiful lands in our southwest and southeast parts of our state and not going after these huge swaths of land on the west side of our state that are given over to the military? That seems where development could happen in a more wise and good way for the earth.
Okay, I'd like to continue this, but I want to get to one more topic before we run out of time, and that's the local Salt Lake County Sheriff's race. It's starting to heat up. Republican candidate Justin Hoyle, pretty critical of Sheriff Rivera following the latest city to announce that it would like to depart from the Unified Police Department. Is there a problem at the Sheriff's Office? Is that fair criticism?
It's fair criticism, and especially in an election year, this is fair criticism. It's not like these there was a long process where these were thought out with Harriman and Riverton. I mean, Harriman gave themselves 1 month to start up a new police department. Riverton pulled out in an emergency meeting at 7 in the morning. What it really shows here is a lack of communication, but it also is a big problem where the board unanimously supported a bill through the last session that said that the board may be allowed to choose their own unified police chief and not have the sheriff be over that aspect, be over the policing. And that bill was killed, and Sheriff Rivera fought against her own board. And so these are fair criticisms to have in an election year. And I think from what I'm hearing from Harriman and Riverton, that it's not necessarily just Rosie, it's not just the sheriff, but it's definitely a lack of communication. And if she's the face of the sheriff's office in UPD, then that becomes a problem.
All right, Crystal, let's bring you in. Is it fair for him to say that this is due to her lack of leadership?
Well, my understanding is Harriman made the decision over 2 years ago, and they designed their badge 2 years ago. So to say it's a fault of Rosie's leadership, she wasn't even the sheriff then. So that seems to be problematic to make that argument. My understanding is that it has to do with the cost structure for the UPD, and that with more of our cities becoming townships, the board has almost doubled in size, and it's becoming more difficult for these communities to find consensus on what the cost structure should look like. And it's a completely different universe than it was in 2009, the last time they put this together. And so it seemed to be less about Rosie and more about this cost structure. And for, is it Justin, right? Mm-hmm. I have a problem with names that start with J. For him to make those accusations against Rosie is kind of strange, since he's also in leadership. So if he's questioning leadership of the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office, it's like questioning himself.
It's always kind of a strange thing when an employee is running against his boss,
a boss.
For a political office. Well, I have a few seconds left.
Yeah.
Does she deserve another term, yes or no?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a huge representative issue that we have the first Latina sheriff in the nation.
Is it time for a change?
It's time for a change. I'm going to vote for Justin Hoyle.
All right. Appreciate your insight. Great conversation, and always glad to have you guys on the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Inside Utah Politics right after the break.